Hey guys, Ben on Big Stuff here. I thought I would make a quick video to go over some of the new software features that we're coming out with. We have been working on this software update for almost the entire year now, and we're getting close. We're on the home stretch. This is going to be the biggest software update we've ever had for the Gen 4 platform. This has a ton of stuff that we're going to be implementing. We're going to have a new update firmware guide that's going to go over all the new features that we're bringing to the system. But can't go over everything now. There won't be enough time to cover everything here. The video would probably be, I don't know, 2 hours long. But I'm going to go over some of the quick highlights that the system is now going to allow you to do. This is not any hardware changes. This is going to be supporting the expansion module that we're coming out with, where it's got 16 analog inputs, 5 digital inputs, 5 frequencies, and 5 resistive base sensors. So that we are supporting that in this release. But I thought I'd go over some of the new features that are just going to be awesome that I know everybody's going to want to use, whether you're a street guy, you're a race car guy, you do stuff after hours on back roads guy. It doesn't matter. You're going to have a lot of features in here that you're going to like. So let's get to it. Some of the cool things that we've got going on here is in the system section, you're going to see we have a lot more stuff here, okay, that is being shown as far as this guy. It used to just be simply a little box up here, and we have grown this a lot. So the first thing that we're going to talk about here is under the rev limiters section. This is pretty standard stuff. You have rev limiters that you can set for the 3-step, 2-step, half-step, and the high rev. Well, we have now made it to where you can put custom offsets on any of those rev limiters. So if you come to rev limiters, you're going to come over to rev limit modifier selection, and you're now going to be able to open up a table, whether it's a 1D or a 2D table, to allow that rev limiter to either go up or go down. So in this case here, if we talk about the 3-step, okay, the 3-step in our world is what we use to activate at the starting line. If you're racing, you release the 3-step, that's like dropping the trans brake and you away and you go, and that's going to start a race timer, okay? So in this condition, you can see here that it would be off. If I turn it on, now you're going to have a couple things that you can do. The first thing is you're going to be able to allow the RPM threshold to exceed what's in your high rev. So for example, down here, the high rev is set for 5,000 RPM. Well, what if you want to go over 5,000 RPM? We're going to let you do that, but you've got to enable that. That way, in case you go over your actual high rev limit, it will still work, but it's on you to enable that, because typically a high rev, you're not going to go past that. But if you want to, for some reason, you can do that, okay? You also have a custom port editor condition. So in the past software releases, we called it the generic port editor. Generic port editor, generic word is gone from this software moving forward. Everything now is custom. You can see down here that where it used to say generic, it now says custom, okay? So we are now calling it the custom port editor, and if I enable the custom port editor, I can come over here to System, Custom Port Editor, and now in this Custom Output Ports 2 column, you'll see here that I have an RPM modifier 3-step, and now I can program any condition I want for it to turn on. I can make it have an active delay, an inactive delay. It can be a certain pulse if you wanted to, but all these different output channels will have to be configured to work to actually allow the custom offset to run, okay? You don't have to do that. If you simply just say CP condition disabled, then it's always going to be on, okay? You also have a number of axes here. So you can have a 1D axis or you can have a 2D axis, okay? 1D is very self-explanatory. If I do 1D, and if I come over here to System, Rev Limiters, and I grab, okay, the 3-step RPM modifier table curve, okay, now you simply see here that you have a curve based on RPM, and you have an RPM offset here above it, okay? So this can be anything in the list that we provide as far as engine, in this case, it'd be engine RPM, and the offset would be above it. So let's make a real common boost builder to application, if you would. So if I was to come over here to Axis and choose boost, okay, now I'm going to come over here and go 3-step. Okay, now I'm going to say if the boost is 0 PSI in the lower left-hand corner And if we're 10 psi in the right-hand corner over here, and if I interpolate, okay, now I'm saying that if the boost is 0 psi, I'm going to let it be 1,000 RPM over. If the boost is 5 pounds, I'm going to let it be 500 RPM over, about. If I'm at 10 pounds, I'm going to have it be a 0 RPM offset. Okay, very simple table. It's what a lot of these applications use this for, is a simple boost builder table. Very simple, very easy to build. You can also do it to where it's a 2D table. So if I make the x-axis source engine RPM and the y-axis source boost, I'd come back over here to system, rev limiters. I go back to that table. Okay, now it's updated. All right. So now you're going to have a 2D axis to play with, all this data in between to be able to modify. So I'm going to modify this lower table. I'm going to make this 500 RPM. I'm going to make this 5,000 RPM. I'm going to interpolate this. I'm sorry, right click over it, interpolate selected cell values. Okay, now it updates this row. I'm going to do apply new XYZ unchanged. That way, this is the Z. It's not going to change anything in here. Okay, now I've got a nice curve here basically to wherever I'm at in this engine RPM and this boost, I'm going to have an offset. So basically anywhere I'm at in this RPM, as soon as I start going from about 2.3 to 2.6 pounds of boost, I'm going to interpolate. So that's where you're going to have the offset be programmable, but you've now got a 2D table to play with. Okay, so again, in this application, up to 1,000 RPM, I'm going to give 2.3 pounds of boost. As soon as I make 2.6, I have no offset. So that's how when you hear those cars go wow, wow, and they come down really fast, that's because there's tables like this. But you can customize this to be whatever you want. You can also choose on the x-axis data sources, RPM, TPS, the race timer, mile an hour, coolant air, map sensor. We've incorporated all of the inputs that are currently on the system, as well as the expansion module. Okay, so if the expansion module, you have that, you can also take that data in as well and apply it to the 2D table. So you have it for the 3-step, you got it for the 2-step. The 2-step is just simply another RPM input that you can have as far as a rev limiter goes. It's just 12 volt in and it activates 2 steps, like a burnout rev limiter if you would. The half step here is when the 3-step and the 2-step are both on, you're going to have another rev limiter which you can work with. Then obviously you've got the high rev. So the high rev here, again, if you, let's say you made the high rev, in this case it's 5,000 RPM. Well, if you wanted to offset it by 500 RPM for whatever reason, you can do it any which way you want based on the X and Y data sources for any reason. Okay, so very cool, very slick. This is going to be standard as far as the software goes now for adding all of these rev limiters, offsets. What's nice too is if you come over here to the data log, we have also added all this data in here. So now in this rev limit section, you now see what the current rev limits are for the 2-step, the 3-step, the half step, and the rev limit. So now you'll see all that data coming in, so you'll know exactly what the RPM was you were targeting and also the offset that it was for each one of those inputs. This rev limit active RPM here, this value, this is the current rev limiter that is being applied. So that when you're on the 3-step, this is going to change what's on the 3-step. When you're on the 2-step, this is going to change what's on the 2-step. If it has an offset, it's going to say, hey, my 2-step base is 2,000 RPM, but my offset is 500, right? So those add up to 2,500. You'll see the rev limit actual active RPM is 2,500. So all this cool data is going to be available. It'll make troubleshooting a breeze. You're going to know exactly what the rev limits are, the current offsets being applied whenever they're happening. It's very, very slick. We can't wait for you guys to try this out and get it in your hands, okay? The next version that we have, or the next one of the other cool things here is that for AFR cuts are now available per cylinder. So what that means is, if you don't know, our system is closed loop per hole, so that in real time, that fuel injector is in real time according to the air-fuel ratio target in that cylinder. So that fuel injector is moving all around to maintain that air-fuel ratio. If the AFR in a single hole starts getting too lean, it will send the cut as active and it will activate a rev limiter, and then you'll want to get off of it. So we now have the ability to individually cut each cylinder as well as a left bank or a right bank, which is pretty standard stuff because that's just reading a bank of each side of the engine. But if you're starting to get too lean, if we have max correction, that one cylinder at 30%, and we still can get the AFR target down low enough in that hole, it will activate it now on the cylinder itself. Another cool feature that we got is on the test modes. If I go system test modes here, now every single output is testable. We didn't have the ninth injector output. We didn't have the shift light. There are a few things left as far as stragglers that we didn't have for the test. The CO2 boost control solenoids here are available for use. The idle air control motor is available to be open and closed. You can move it open and closed if you want. Just got to be careful with those. If they're not out of housing, they can open up too far and then you may not be able to get it back to where it needs to go. But every output is configurable now as far as testing. All your PWMs are here and listed. So you can see here for PWM 07, 25 Hertz, I'm at 50% duty cycle. You press on and then it'll just start pulsing that output however you want to just do it for a test. That's, hear a solenoid click or something. But every output now is configurable on the system, which is great. Okay. Obviously, standard was testing each injector, testing all the coil inputs that are run through the injector firing order, the coil firing order. That's all standard stuff. So very cool stuff that we have. We have all the test modes now available. Okay. We've also been able to come in here now, go to system, pressure and sensor configuration, and you can now name any of these inputs anything you want. Okay. So MAP sensor default name is MAP. The fuel pressure sensor data is pressure fuel. I can name this anything I want for any of these sensors. So let's just say, for example, you want to take the fuel pressure, but you're not measuring fuel pressure, okay? It's some other pressure. So you can come over here, go XYZ pressure, and that is going to be the name now of this input. The interface will still show fuel pressure sensor cal data, but your custom name, your custom scaling, okay, will all be applied. And any one of these inputs here, you can apply that to, except for the built-in G meter. The G meters X and Y axis and Z axis are all going to stay just factory default. There's no reason to change those. But any of these inputs can be changed, okay? We have also exposed the pan vacuum. The pan vacuum was always hard-coded as far as just a 2-bar map sensor for pan vacuum. Well, now if you don't want to run pan vacuum on that input, you can click Other, give it a custom name, ZYX pressure, and now you can come in here, scale it, and now that input is available for use because obviously we know that not everybody uses the vacuum sensor on their application. It just frees up another input to do whatever you want to do with that input instead of the pan vac. Okay. So very cool feature. All the stuff is renameable. When you do rename everything, it will completely update in the data logger section, not only for when you're recording to your laptop, but also when you're getting the data off of the SD card as well. Okay. So if you get a data logger SD card browser where all your actual data is stored on the card, those names will update as well on the card. So everything is transferred everywhere, so there's no mix-up, okay? What we've also done too is we've given you the ability to reset all the names. So for example, if in the pressure and sensor configuration, you just want to reset this column, or you want to reset all of them, you can just do reset custom names. It'll put everything back to the default names from the factory. That way, if you're selling your system or for whatever reason you don't want to actually have the custom names anymore, you can do this and it'll put everything back to factory. You do have to be online with the ECU to do this operationally. You cannot do this offline, okay? So caveat here, offline will not work as far as these custom names. You got to be online when you do the custom names and you make those changes, and you have to be online as well if you're going to reset. Okay, you can't do those at the time being for an in the offline calibration. Got to be online. Okay, so that's that. We've got the expansion module configuration here under system. This is where again the 16 inputs here that we're adding on our expansion module are going to be available. Again, you can fully name this custom name, whatever you want it to be. So this is going to be analog input 1. I'm just going to put XYZ analog 1 expansion module. Okay. So now it's going to take that name for whatever I named it. Again, it will be used for that input. So not just calling it analog input 1 or the factory default name. Okay. It's going to take that name everywhere. Your data logger, your replay, it's all available here. Name anything you want. All right. For those, we're going to have the final code here with the final iteration is going to have a reset name as well for all these analogs. So haven't finished that up yet, but we're going to work here to get all these guys reset as well for this page. Okay. So analog input, analog expansion module here, and then also here on the expansion module, the digital input. So these are basically just the 12-volt inputs that, again, you can custom name anything you want for these guys. We're still wrapping up the frequency and the resistive based sensors. We're close. That'll be coming in here soon. Okay. Some of the other things here that we've also done is on the rev limiter, we've given you 2 more ways to control the power on the rev limiter. We now have a dwell control and a timing control. So you'll now be able to come in here, enable this dwell starting line section. So now you will actually have dwell moving around the background to grab the engine, along with engine torque management, along with, if you want, the timing to be able to move around to fine tune the engine rev limiter. Okay. You can leave these gain settings from the factory alone. You're going to have minimum engine RPM, minimum TPS. You can have all these different minimums before this actually takes effect. You know, maybe you actually want to make at least 5 pounds of boost here in order for this to work correctly before it actually starts doing some dwell reduction, right? You can configure it all here. And again, as well, you could enable the custom port editor so that you could have all those output channels have to be true before this actually turns on as well. If you don't know what ignition dwell is, basically it's in its simplest form, it's how fast we're charging the ignition coils. Okay, you charge the ignition coil up, it lets go of the spark. You give it a weaker spark, it's going to be easier to control the engine because we're not blowing up the fuel as hard. It's just easier to control power. Okay, so this is a dwell control for the starting line. And we've also given you the ability to do timing. Okay, so you'll be able to use timing as well to be able to come in here. You'll see your timing move around. Again, this works with whatever is the current set point. So this works, these both work with your 3-step input, your 2-step input, half step. Okay, these will control those based on the input that is on. So it moves around based on whatever input is actually triggered. Okay, so this works for all of the rev limiters that are being applied. All right, so very cool stuff we got going on there. Okay, we've also got the ability to do an ECU shutdown delay. So if anybody's ever heard of a turbo timer, you can now keep the ECU alive when you turn off the ignition. Okay, so that the car will run for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 seconds, whatever it's going to be before it actually shuts down. Okay. We definitely threw some safety conditions in here because if you are accidentally, or if you turned off the ignition and you're driving the car by accident, you actually turn off the ignition, the engine's not going to die because this is on. Okay. You've got to be 5% below the TPS sensor for it to actually work. Okay. If you go above 5%, then it's going to not allow you to shut down. Maybe something happened, you meant to turn it off, but it's still on. Okay, these are some safety thresholds that we actually put in there, okay, in order to keep that going. You can also choose not keep the engine running. Maybe you just want to keep the ECU alive for doing some processes or whatever, okay? But we can kill the engine from actually you'd actually turn the engine off, but you could keep the ECM running itself, okay, to just do some processes if you're doing some stuff, okay? So that's new for the software here, okay? We've also, in the rev limiter section, we have created a single point of contact here for the rev limit error tables because we have now created a new table for every rev limit input, okay? 3-step has its own table, 2-step has its own table, half-step has its own table, and the high rev has its own table. And again, you can configure these axes however you want. You don't have to typically mess with the vertical axis or the horizontal axis. You can leave these alone. But now you've got 4 tables to play with as far as fine tuning your rev limiters to really get them dialed in very well, versus in older software versions, we just had one. We only had one of these tables. The version that's out now, we have two rev limit tables. We have a high rev, and then we have another table which is just for any of the 2-step, 3-step, or half-step. But now we've separated them all out so that if you can fine tune the rev limiting per input if you have to, if it's not hitting properly, if it's a little too hard, if it's not hard enough, you can fine tune all that here on these individual tables here. Okay, so that's a really neat feature as well that we've thrown in there. So that's some of the cool stuff we've got coming for you. We have a huge list of things that we've added, that we've fixed. I'm going to do another video breaking out more of that. But if you guys haven't downloaded the latest Bigstuff software updates, you really should go help and do check for update. Okay, and you're just going to say here no updates are available. Okay, get it, because we've also implemented a new log review here to where we can have up to 7 logs showing at the very top. So here you can have 2 data logs being compared if you want. And you can see here I've got a 1 and I've got a 2. So this is the primary log, that's a secondary log. If I uncheck this primary log, now this one becomes primary, and maybe I want to compare it to that guy. Or if I want to grab this one, this piece is the primary, and this is going to be compared to. So very cool features as far as now being able to compare this stuff very easily, okay? Whereas before, in order to just compare the two, it was a little bit more cumbersome. But now we've got the ability to basically fly through some logs and just move around and look at your logs really fast, look at dry shaft curves. For power management, this really helps out quite a bit. But you can have up to 2 of them actually showing on the screen at once. But we now have a row, about 7 logs you can have open all at the same time, and you're flying through. So quick little glimpse of what's coming out. I have so much more to talk about, but we'll save that for another video. As usual, guys, thank you so much for your support. We just cannot say how blessed we are to work with racers, crew chiefs, the dealers that we have. It's just awesome. At this time, there's also going to be a big announcement that we haven't made yet. We're looking forward to this, but we can't talk about it yet. So we're very excited to be able to have an announcement that'll be coming shortly. But that'll be very big for the brand, for exposure, for getting our stuff out there. So just want to thank everybody for running our stuff. If you have any questions, please give us an email at support@BigstuffTPM.com, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you.